Hello, I'm Dr. Andrew Sargent. Welcome to my course, 101 Most Misunderstood Verses. We're coming to you today from Sacred Fire Church in Bellevue, Florida. Come on by. So you have a certain belief system about God, man, and reality. You have whatever particular struggles for survival you are facing in the place that you are, and then you have the natural human inclination towards selfishness. You blend that all up and you get a culture, all right? So they build systems for survival where one's worth is found in his or her enhancement of, rather than diminishment of the struggle to survive. I'm reading Solzhenitsyn, which this book is just mammoth. So I'm almost 800 pages into it, but it's mammoth. He's talking today. These guys, they're guards. They have to get these prisoners that over there, and it's the middle of winter, and they're taking them through up to a new gulag that they're going to build, and some of the men are so weak by the time that they get there that they fall down in the snow and they can't get up. And they're like, well, we can't carry them because then we're going to lose twice as many. And so what they would do is they would send the men on, and they can't lose guards to stay with every fallen prisoner. And so the men would move on, the guards would go back, and you'd hear a pow! And then the guard would catch up. Just shot you because you were a drain on the group. We're trying to get there. You're hindering us. Boom, bullet in the head. You're done. And in these kinds of places where the brutality of the human nature, where the 7 deadly sins are allowed to run amok in the human heart and are barely restrained by society, you have that kind of brutality and domination and crushing begins to dominate society. Now, women had an advantage in their struggle for survival. Okay? They lacked the physical strength often needed to thrive in brutal environments, but they possessed something that the strong ones did not. They could reproduce. And they had something the strong ones wanted: love, tenderness, and sex. Men built civilization with the help of women and for the love of women. And the role that women had in it, in any given society, was how much they could bring to the table. So let's suppose your survival depended on being useful, but that you had some natural weakness. Maybe you were missing a foot. What would you do? You would work twice as hard. You would go out of your way to look useful.
Yep.
Look at me. I'll go faster on 1 foot than you will on 2 because I want to live, I want to survive. And so the same thing happens. You've got this dynamic, and women and children and everybody fighting. Of course, children are often fools and don't understand the rules of the game yet, but the women did. And they either did well at it or poorly to make themselves useful. And of course, according to Scripture, a real man loves his family no matter what, carries his family no matter what, takes care of his family no matter what. But it's in places where scriptures have not gone. It is not uncommon for the human natural tendency of sinfulness to look at the weak, the slow, as useless, the old, the broken. What good are you? Yeah, I mean, sure, you took care of me for 50 years. What good are you now, old man? Now, in First Estratus, the guards of the Persian king have a contest to name the strongest thing in the world. The third guy, he comes up. He says women are the strongest thing in the world. Gentlemen, he began, the emperor is certainly powerful. Men are numerous and wine is strong. But who rules and controls them all? It is women. Women gave birth to the emperor and all the men who rule over the land and sea. Men brought them into the world. Women brought up the men and planted the vineyards from which wine comes. Women make the clothes that men wear. Women bring honor to men. In fact, without women, men could not live. Men may accumulate silver or gold or other beautiful things, but if they see a woman with a pretty face or a good figure, they will leave it all to gape and stare, and they will desire her more than their wealth. A man will leave his own father who brought him up and leave his own country to get married. He will forget his father and his mother and his country to spend the rest of his life with his wife. So you must recognize that women are your masters. Don't you work and sweat and then take all that you have earned and give it to your wives? A man will take his sword and go out to attack, rob, and steal, and sail the seas and rivers. He may have to face lions or travel in the dark, but when he is robbed, stolen, and plundered, he will bring the loot home to the woman he loves. A man loves his wife more than his parents. Some men are driven out of their minds on account of a woman, and others become slaves for the sake of a woman. Others have been put to death, have ruined their lives, or have committed crimes because of a woman. So now do you believe me? The emperor's power is certainly great. No nation has the courage to attack him. But once I saw him with Apame, his concubine, the daughter of the famous Barticus. While sitting at the emperor's right, she took his crown off his head, put it on her own, and then slapped his face with her left hand. All the emperor did was look at her with his mouth open. Whenever she smiles at him, he smiles back, and when she gets angry with him, he flatters her and teases her until she is in a good mood again. All right, so just reading that story, how does that even relate to the way we normally project about what it was like in the past, where we weren't? We are so cut off from the past. We have so little understanding. This man has just described every male-female relationship I know. And he's writing thousands of years ago. Men love their wives. Men love their children. Men conquer the world for the love of the women in their lives. All right, so we got all this stuff working in conjunction together. Gender inclination. Every gender has its gifts. Every gender brings it to the table to survive. You have certain beliefs about God, man, and reality. You have certain threats and obstacles that you have to overcome to create a civilization, and you've got a certain selfish nature, and blend it all up, and you've got culture. Family is the core of a society. Its patterns are vital to the continued existence and prosperity of the whole. This is one of the reasons why the early feminists wanted to destroy the family. They hate the family, hate it. Even if they have families of their own, they hate the family, they scorn it. They believe it's enslavement, imprisonment. They want every individual to do what's right in their own eyes, and they view the existence of religious and moral people who put down rules for society on them to be oppressors. How dare you oppress me with your morals? How dare you oppress me with the patterns of your life? How dare you oppress me by telling me what I can and can't be? I will be whatever I want to be. If I want to be a dog, I'm a dog. If I'm a cat, cat. If I say that I'm Chinese, I'm Chinese. If I say that I'm a man, even though I'm a woman, I'm a man, and you better treat me that way. So the brutality of survival demanded that society function with a consistent and orderly way, with little room for experimentation. You stick with what works. So once the people figured out how to survive, and things seem to be going pretty good for them, even though there might be better ways of doing it, they're going to stick with it. Because people are not chess pieces. You don't mess around with them. You don't sit there and say, hey, you know what? Let's just burn everything down and start from scratch. I'm sure it'll be great. What could go wrong? I find myself saying that all the time. What could go wrong? Well, a lot could go wrong, right? You don't tinker with what works. One is foolish to imagine that some 6,000 years of certain gender paradigms are merely the product of the arbitrary advantages of the good old boy club. If civilization collapsed tomorrow, the ages-old pattern of gender relationships would reestablish themselves within a few years, if not a few months. The only reason we can boast what we've created is because we have also created a society with an infrastructure that artificially props us up. Go back to brutal world, and the old paradigms are coming back, and they're coming back fast. One is also unjust to judge the people of the scriptures by modern perceptions of gender and class when our entire context of technological advance has alleviated most of the immediately perceivable need for such strict social order. We still need such strict social order. We don't recognize what's going to happen to us when we crack it. Right? But if you read Unwin, Sex and Culture, he basically establishes it very clearly. He studied 89 major civilizations from their birth to their death, and evaluated their cultural achievements, and when those cultural achievements were at their high point, when they were in dissolution, when the nations were coming to an end, and why. And this was his conclusion when it was all done. It had to do with their sexual morals. That a society never got off the ground, would never escape the animal state, the zoic state, never got off the ground if they didn't have premarital chastity and marital fidelity. They were the two most important values because it allowed a society to channel its energies into the building. So everything in a society got better once you got control of the sexuality and a strong family. The first thing to go was premarital chastity. And then they said as soon as within a certain amount of time after premarital chastity goes, marital fidelity begins to corrode. And when those are gone, you're done. He basically said that no society survived more than 100 years after they had completely abandoned the very belief in moral structure. Now, where do we mark America as having abandoned the idea of social structure? Some people say, oh, it was the 60s, it was the 70s. Maybe not. But we're on a fast track for ruination. And we definitely have, in the 1970s and the 60s, a massive turn away. Now, a massive turn away does not mean a total turn away, but I think we've achieved a state in our society now where the very idea of moral virtue is laughed at. The very idea that you should not have sex until you get married is like, what? What? Why would I suffer that kind of want? That's ridiculous. So we're definitely there. It's gone. When I was growing up, the teenagers would say, do you believe in premarital sex? I believe in premarital sex. Do you believe in premarital sex? But the idea of premarital sex was still part of a conversation. I asked my kids, I said, other than from me, have you ever heard any of your friends or any of your friends' parents ever use the word premarital sex? And they went, no. Not even in their radar. All right, it's unfair to interpret every event through the angry lens of present critical Marxist struggle, assuming the worst of biblical characters. So for the time being, let's set aside the idea that females were so despised by Lot that trading his own daughters for two male strangers was something that Peter would deem righteous. We got to get, I know I've spent a lot of time belaboring this, and I really hate to do it, but this is so important to get here, because until we can rip those feminist glasses off and realize that we're very unfair to the people of the past, we can't even begin to understand that there's something else going on in this story. All right, for one, the importance of hospitality. You can never underestimate the importance of hospitality rights in the biblical period. The idea that a person could travel and be safe when they travel because they're taken into someone's home and cared for, it's the hospitality rights is the first covenant invented among men. You ate from a man's table, and that man protected you. You're in foreign parts, and you have to be able to depend on your safety. If you can't depend on your safety when you travel, then you can't trade. And every society is only able to thrive off what they can produce themselves. But a society that can trade safely can prosper greatly. So if you can't trade safely, if people aren't safe in your presence, so the idea of hospitality rights is that I can go to that village, that city, and even though I'm a stranger, someone will take me in and they will protect me, and they will use their relationships in the community to be a cover over me. Then I can then take my goods and trade. But if you're not safe, you don't trade. If you don't trade, you're impoverished. And so the only hope of prosperity was to have a safe traveling society. I mean, it was really important because it raised it to the level of the sacred. So we're here. Hospitality is one of the most important sacred duties in the ancient Near East. When someone ate from your table, it was a three-way covenant between you, them, and your God. To eat with a man was to swear before your God that you will never lift a hand against them, that you will protect them. It was usually 3 days from the last time you ate from their hand. It was guaranteed protection. So they have this one instance in which, among the Bedouins, you could kill a stranger without any harm. And he killed his friend. And so they were going to execute him. And he tried to defend himself, saying, hey, I haven't eaten from his table for like a week. And they went, you have eaten from his table so often and for so long. The very fat of your belly is his table. And all right, so let's read 1 Clement 10:7. It connects this right to Abraham's success in Genesis 18. So 1 Clement 10:7. For his faith and hospitality a son was given unto him in old age. And by obedience he offered him a sacrifice unto God on one of the mountains which he showed him. This is the Greek flood writer, Lucian. Of the men of the original creation they tell this tale. They were rebellious and willful and performed unholy deeds, disregarding the sanctity of oaths and hospitality. Oaths and hospitality. Because hospitality is swearing before your God to care for the person that is eaten from your table as if they are family. And behaving cruelly to suppliants. It was for these misdeeds that the great destruction fell upon them. So let me read that part. And it was for these misdeeds that the great destruction fell upon them. So Ovid details Jupiter's investigation of the men of what he calls the fourth age, who, while cruel and violent like those of the third age, added impiety and rapaciousness to their sins. They broke guest host, family, and marriage bonds. These are all covenantal bonds. All right. Jupiter discovers the truth in the inhospitable home of the Arcadian tyrant Lycian. Even after Jupiter reveals himself as a god, Lycian plots his murder and feeds him the boiled flesh of a murdered man.
Yuck.
He didn't want to have to spend money on somebody coming into his house, so he killed a man and cooked him and served him in the story, serves him to Jupiter. But this is how important they took hospitality rights. I'm not saying this story actually took place. I'm saying that it's emphasizing how vital this idea of hospitality rights were. So hospitality is connected to issues of holiness and covenant. So you're making a covenant before God to protect this person who come into your home. And the ability for people to travel protected was vital for the whole community. It wasn't just good for you. It was good for the whole community. The people of Sodom were creating an environment that would swallow them up even if God had not destroyed them. Because nobody would travel there. Nobody would bring them goods. Nobody would trade with them. Nobody would have anything, and they would just shrivel up and die because they wouldn't be able to do anything that they couldn't produce themselves. So, do we have mangoes at our grocery stores? Most of the fruit and produce in our stores come from all over the world. You have to be able to get it, and you have to be able to send it, and you have to be able to distribute it. And hospitality rights were core to this concept. So the term righteousness is often measured in one's fidelity to sacred covenant bonds above all else. All right, so this is the idea. He's righteous. He's righteous because he keeps covenant. And hospitality rights is covenant. It is not safe to break it. It is rooted in the sacred bond of the meal. All right? Everything touching the holy was a huge deal, so this is what it is. It's the sacred meal, sacred thing. You've taken an oath, and even if it hurts you, you keep your word, because keeping your word is one of the most important things. The whole of civilization is dependent on you being a person who keeps your word. All right, so the ancient Near Eastern scholar Robertson Smith observed among the Arabs in the ancient Near East that the preservation of the family unit was dependent on a general distrust of outsiders. Only those bound by blood could be trusted. So literally, society of distrust. Americans, the Western world has built a society of trust. We generally trust our neighbors unless they give us reason not to. Most of the ancient Near East was a civilization of distrust. You trusted nobody unless you had very specific reasons to. And one of the ways that you could secure trust is through covenant. If you were a person who believed in the gods and you swore before the gods to do right by me, I could trust you. But if you were not a person who honored your word, I could not trust you. And civilization would come apart. So they extended this bond artificially through hospitality rights in the communal meals. Right? You're not part of my family, but I'm going to feed you from my table. And now that is an oath before your gods that you will do no harm to me. And it's an oath from me before my gods that I will do no harm to you. And so what is in you is in me, and we are made one by it. So the bond created through sacred sharing a meal was a three-way sacrificial participation. It was covenant's earliest form. It declared what's in you is in me, and we are united by it. We're one. All right, Ezra 4:11, writing to Artaxerxes the king. Your servants, the men of the providence beyond the river, send greetings, and now be it known to the king that if this city is rebuilt and the walls finished, they will not pay tribute, custom, or toll, and the royal revenue will be harmed. Now because we eat the salt of the palace, it is not fitting for us to witness the king's dishonor. Therefore we send and inform the king. So these people, they ate salt from the king's table. So in Persia, it was not any meal, but salt. And so in the tale in Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, when Morgiana recognizes that a guest in the home of Ali Baba is the chief of the thieves that Ali Baba has robbed in order to make himself rich, but Ali Baba does not know it. But she is alerted to something wrong because the man asks, I have a sensitive palate, my stomach is tender. Could you ask your maidservant not to put any salt in my food? And when they come and tell Morgiana, hey, no salt in the food, she goes, what kind of a man will not eat salt with his friend? So she went out and she peeked at the guest and realized who it was. So she actually kills the guy because she can't alert the family to their danger without them being in greater danger. So she has to kill the man. She goes out and does a sexy dance for him. And when he's entertaining, she jumps on him and he's got a knife concealed. So she pulls the knife out and then she dances with the knife and then she plunges it into his heart to protect the family.
Good girl.
Yeah. All right. In 1 Samuel 28:7, then said Saul unto his servants, seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. Now, he's killed a lot of the witches, right? But now he's looking for a witch because God's not talking to him. So the compromises we will make when the Lord's not cooperating with us. Behold, there was a woman that hath a familiar spirit at Endor. And a woman came unto Saul and saw that he was sore troubled, and said to him, behold, thine handmaid has obeyed your voice. This is after she's conjured the spirit and she's come to him. But she say, look, I have obeyed your voice. I put my life in, taken my life into my hands, and have listened to your words which you spoke to me. Now therefore, pray, hearken you also unto the voice of your handmaid, and let me set a morsel of bread before you and eat. I now realize who you are. You've asked me to conjure the spirit of Samuel. I've conjured the spirit of Samuel, and now I know who you are. And now that I know who you are, Saul, the killer of witches, I'm going to put food before you, and you're going to eat it. And of course she says, so you'll have strength for the road. It's not strength for the road. No. You're going to eat from my hand. Well, he doesn't want to do it, so he refuses. He says he won't eat. But his servants, together with the woman, compelled him, and he hearkened to their voice. The woman had a fatted calf in the house, and she hastened and killed it, and took flour and kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread thereof. And she brought it before Saul and before his servants, and they ate it. Now they can't touch her. Mm-hmm. But she's insisting, eat. Now he's covenanted with a witch. All right, so we have lots of other passages that I'm not going to take a lot of time with, but we just have to recognize the importance of eating from a man's table. And so these people have come into Lot's house, and they've eaten from his table. Not just he, but his entire family is obligated to protect these men. It is a sacred duty. The Greeks blamed the global flood on the destruction of all the land on people who violated hospitality rights. It was really big deal. Better that you suffer some indignity than that you violate hospitality rights and endanger the whole of civilization and everybody's lives in your family. So hospitality was one of the greatest virtues of the ancient world. And we've already talked about why that is. Now, it ties our story together with Abraham's encounter with the angels in Genesis 18. Because it's Genesis 18 to 19. In 18, Abraham is a good dude. And he's honoring his guest-host relationship. And he's welcoming strangers. To be a person who welcomed strangers and took them into your house and made covenant with them to protect them from any harm that might come from them in the community was considered a great nobility. Now, in 19, we're going to have the story where Lot takes them in. So in 18, Abraham takes in the three strangers, one of whom is God, two of whom are angels. Those two angels are then sent to Sodom. Lot takes them in. And just like Abraham does, he brings them into his house and he makes a covenant with them, brings them under his protection. Now, they don't really need his protection. No. Because we see in the story that they know how to take care of business. But now this is going to be important for us. Because when we get next week and we start talking about the concubine in Judges 17, I said earlier it was 19, Judges 17, we're going to have to see that even this terrible situation is worse. This horrible Sodom situation is even worse in the period of the Judges. All right. So we got to make a comparison. So Abraham sits at his tent door like Lot sits at the city gate. Both rise at the approach of strangers. Both bow to the ground and offer hospitality. Each of them calls their visitors Lord and call themselves a servant. They both offer food, shelter, and water to wash up. And each promises a speedy departure. Hey, I won't keep you. Now, this is important because there are stories, and especially in the Judges one, we're going to see that they break this too. They won't let the person get an early start. Let them early start. You got to promise an early start. But they keep manipulating them to keep them. So that is also a sign that something's wrong when we get to the story of the concubine. Everything's broken in the guest host hospitality situation. All right, so we can say to ourselves, is Abraham the replication of the paradigm from chapter 18 to chapter 19 with Abraham and then with Lot? Is it just because it's a common pattern in the world? I think, yes, it's a common pattern in the world, but it's good people that hold that pattern. Just like in the time of the Judges, you've got Boaz, who honors the poverty laws. In a time when no one's going to say boo to him, he honors the poverty laws because the Torah tells him to. Right? So yeah, there are rules, but there are people that don't honor them. I mean, the Indian people are very hospitable. I've never seen such wonderful hospitality as in India. But we ended up in a person's home where the wife threw food at us and cursed us while we ate it. If you like what you're hearing today, please subscribe below. And don't forget to share it on as many platforms as you can. And tell your friends to watch. Thank you. All right. So let's talk about Rabbi Eliezer. All right. So this is what he says. He who walks with wise men shall be wise. This refers to Lot, who walked with our father Abraham and learned of his good deeds and ways. They said, "What did Father Abraham do? He made for himself a house opposite to Haran, and he received every one who entered into or went out of from Haran, and he gave him to eat and to drink. And he said to them, Say ye, the God of Abraham is the only one in the universe." So he's preaching, he's evangelizing. When Lot came to Sodom, he did likewise. When they made proclamation in Sodom, all who strengthen the hand of the poor or needy with a loaf of bread shall be burned with fire. He was afraid of the men of the city, who did not venture to do so by day, but he did it by night, as it is said. And the two angels came to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Why did Lot sit in the gate of Sodom? Because he was afraid of the men of the city, and did not venture to act charitably by day, but he did so by night. He saw the two angels walking in the street of the city, and he thought they were wayfarers in the land, and he ran to meet them, and he said to them, Come and lodge overnight in my house, eat and drink, and you shall go on your way in peace. But the men would not accept this for themselves, and he took them by the hand against their will and brought them inside his house. Oh, as it is said, he urged them greatly. A certain young man of the people of that city saw them, and he ran and told all the men of that city, and they gathered together at the door of the house to do according to their wont, even deeds of sodomy, as it is said. And they called unto Lot and said to him, Where are the men who came to thee tonight? Bring them forth unto us, that we may know them. What did Lot do? Just as Moses gave his life for the people, so Lot gave up his 2 daughters instead of the 2 angels. As it is said, Behold, now I have 2 daughters. But the men would not agree and did not accept them. Now that's a rabbi's interpretation of these events. But notice, he equates Lot's offering of the daughters with Moses offering his own life. Mm-hmm. He stands in the gap. God, if you're going to destroy them, blot me out too. You say you're going to start fresh with me, wipe them out? No. If you're not going to take them, don't take me. He offered his own life, and he interprets him offering the daughters as offering his own life. Now, I disagree with this interpretation a little bit, but at least it shows you where people's heads are from an ancient perspective of what's going on here. So let's suppose for a second that Lot's offer is legitimate. Okay, I don't believe it's legitimate. Let's pretend that he actually does intend to exchange his daughters. Given hospitality rights, the sacred bond of the guest-host relationship, why might those of the ancient world deem these actions as righteous? Let's read T.D. Alexander. Concerning the events in Sodom, we should not judge too harshly a man placed in an extremely dangerous and apparently impossible situation. Faced with the demands of the crowd, Lot had few options. How easy it would have been for him to let the mob have its way. Yet rather than yield to their wishes, he is prepared to protect his guests at the cost of dishonoring his own daughters. Lot's predicament calls for a sympathetic understanding rather than a harsh condemnation. Again, it's a lot of stuff that we prepared in the first part of this to really understand the nature of this conversation. So even if we grasp the seriousness of guest-host covenantal, and when I say covenantal, I mean sacred bonds, we still might view his choice by Lot as an affront to his sacred duties to his own household. But we must understand that the sacred bond is not merely between Lot and his guests, but between Lot's household and their guests. The household is a corporate entity. Hence, Eleazar interprets it as Lot offering his own life as something precious, not something despised. No, but as putting his own life there. Okay, the daughters have as much of a sacred duty to protect these men as their father does. Now, we don't tend to think that way, but we should. This is family, and family answers for one another. All right, so in the face of an impossible situation in which you have these choices, right? What are the choices you can make? So what can he do? He can offer himself and be homosexually used, right? He can violate sacred hospitality. We could offer his wife, and that would be adultery, or the daughters with an act of fornication. Now we can say, well, they probably harm the daughters. But this is what the funny thing is, we're so fixated on taking everything exactly as it's worded to us that it's not real. All right, so we do have these ideas of these sons-in-laws. Now, we're not sure whether these sons-in-laws are betrothed to the daughters that he has, or whether he has other daughters who are in their house and he cannot rescue. Some people suggest that these men we would describe it as fiancés, but that's not the way they would think of it. There was a 2-stage marriage. You were married and you were covenantally bound to one another, but you didn't consummate the marriage for a certain amount of time. Okay, so it was 2 stages. In Genesis 19:14. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-laws, literally takers of his daughters, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed in their eyes to be joking. It's hard to know exactly what the relationship is. There's some paralanguage going on here. Many elements of human exchange are determined not merely by the words, right? We recognize that. It's not just the words that we say, but by the pitch, the inflection, sometimes the nuance of the context. So we actually have a thing called contextual communication. Americans are direct communicators, so we don't get contextual communication. Contextual communication means that the words that are being used are not what they appear to be. So a friend of mine was a missionary in Japan, and he gets a call. This new woman has joined his church. She's moved away from a place, come to his town, and she's moved into his church, and he gets a call from the old pastor. Now, my friend's an American. And this pastor talks to him for about a half an hour, and then they hang up. And at the end of a half an hour, he still has absolutely no idea what the guy wanted. So he goes to his board, and he says, "All right, guys, I had this conversation with a Japanese pastor. I don't know what he wanted, but So they said, well, tell us word for word exactly what he said. So he's recounting word for word as much as he can remember exactly what they said. The conversation's over, and they go, oh, he wants to know whether the so-and-so who just joined our church is going to continue to pay tithe to his church. Because it's customary in Japan to pay tithe to the church you get saved in, no matter where you go. And he laughs. He goes, we didn't talk about money at all. There was nothing in the conversation would have led me to believe that he wanted to know about tithes. But that was it. It's that they're contextual communicators. So the words are being said, but sometimes you're paying attention to what you didn't say, what you could have said versus what you did say. And this is just as important. Also the paralanguage, right? So we got all these little nuances of things, inflections and whatnot. All right, so let's suppose somebody comes up to a table and they say, you're sitting down, right? So Lois and Lynn, you're having dinner in a cafe. And Sandy walks up to you and says, hey, mind if I sit down? It doesn't matter whether you say yes or no. It only matters how you say yes or no. Think about all the different ways you would respond to that. No. Do you mind if I sit down? No, I don't mind if you sit down. No, sit down. Yeah, sit down. But you just said yes, you do mind. But then you're saying yeah. Okay. Doesn't matter. It matters how you say it. And the same thing happens. How is it being said? How is it being understood? So you can hint at things, especially in cultures that are contextual communicators versus direct communicators like Americans. So the ultimate intent in these exchanges are carried solely by sarcasm, disappointment, incredulity, or indignant tones. Oh, yeah, I'm sure that happened. Oh, yeah. You can mock people. The parent calls up to the child, come down for dinner. Come in. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So you're reading in a foreign tongue, because you're reading. So where's paralanguage in reading? We try and create it. We use italics, we use all bolds, we underline, we'll use all capital letters, right, or we bold it. But it's very hard. So we will try and conjure in typing and writing something that reflects the essence of the emotionality with which we're trying to say it. We really work hard to capture that. So in other words, a person who's reading something that's from their own context is going to know what's being said. They're going to get it. A foreigner doesn't get it, but a person from that world is going to get it. So we also need to understand that the ancient Near East are cultures of hyperbole. They talk big. They act big. But they talk big, and in their talking, they're like, they're acting big. But when they actually go to perform, they're far more measured, in their expectations. You go to buy something in the markets, and it's, $10. Oh, I'm not going to pay $10 for that. I'll offer you $5. What? You steal more food from the mouths of my children? Oh, my ancestors are crying out against me from the grave.
Okay, I'll take the $5.
Yeah, okay, $5. Right. So the people of the ancient Near East talk big, act small. Talk wild, act calmly. Comparatively, because any culture can be more wild or less wild. So we have to consider three things in this conversation that Lot has with them, with the angels and everything. He's using Lord and servant language. So that's the hyperbole. Oh, I am nothing. I am dirt to be wiped your feet on. Oh, come to my house. I live for no other purpose than to see you happy. What is my misery compared to your joy? Oh, come. I will not eat for a week, but no, have your belly full. I would not wish to see you leave hungry. How would I face my ancestors in the afterlife if I let a guest go hungry? Right? You get a lot of this. They're bowing, they're scraping, they're, oh, you are my master. You are constant self-belittling and all the stooping and bowing. So we have this situation where Abraham is trying to buy land, right? And he offers to give the land so he said to them, if you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat from me Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for buying place. He wants to bury Sarah, and he wants to buy a place to bury her, someplace permanent, something that he can own. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, and all who went in at the gate of the city, no, my lord, hear me, I give you the field, I give it to you. I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. Oh, for nothing. Take it. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, but if you will hear me, I give the price of the field. Accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, my lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me?
So basically he's asking for 400 shekels.
Oh, but what is nothing between us? No, it is nothing. What would I even consider it for? What is that between us? Take the land. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. My sources tell me that Ephron ripped him off. It went from, take it, what is that between us? Oh, it's 400 shekels, but what does that mean anything to me? He stole from him. Mm-hmm. He robbed him. You see, what's happening, what the words are, is not about what's actually happening. They, from that culture, understand what's actually being said as opposed to the words. Mm-hmm. The words are belied by the action. So we need to hear Lot through culturally informed ears. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of the Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them. Now remember, Eliezer's interpretation of being in the gate was that he was trying to do kindness by night. But to sit in the gates of a city is to position yourself as one of the leaders of the community. Mm-hmm. All right, it's where you conducted business. You bought and sold, you traded, you fulfilled marriage contracts. It was what you did in the public, so the whole community understood what was happening. And you always had these witnesses. So when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house." Oh, well, I'm just a little slave, and just come. Oh, bow, come, mighty lords, and spend the night and wash your feet. Mm-hmm. Then you may rise up early and go on your way. They said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." But he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. He made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Boom, 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 covenant bond. They are his ultimate duty. Mm-hmm. They are his daughter's ultimate duty. Not their whim and their pleasure, but their safety and their protection. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, his in-laws, his two sons-in-laws, or either would-be sons-in-laws or actual sons-in-laws, and that there were daughters we don't know about. They surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may, basically, rape them." Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door behind him, said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. It better for me to give you my daughters than to allow these men harm."
Mm-hmm. When he even pointed out the fact that he's got covenant with them.
Right. There's a covenant bond. But think about what he's just said. The question we want to ask ourselves is this legitimate? Is he actually offering his daughters? Or is he offering something that they don't want, won't take?
He's casting a little shame on their direction.
But casting shame on them for the very offer. "Dad, can I borrow your Lamborghini?" "No, please, take my eyes." Take my eyes. "Oh, really? Here, just, come on, drink my blood. Come on. Better that I die and you drink my blood than I let you touch my precious baby, my precious Lamborghini." So here we have to ask ourselves, is this a legitimate offer? How do the men actually respond to the offer? How do they interpret the offer? Do they go, the girls, they're pretty good looking.
They weren't interested in girls.
Mm-mm. No, they're interested in girls, but they don't want these girls, and they don't want them for a very specific reason. Now remember, they're going to talk one way, they're going to act another way. It's not uncommon to talk one way, but your intention and meaning is something wholly other. He's like, "These men have come under the roof of my house. Take my daughters instead." Why have they never raped him? Why have they never raped his daughters? Why have they never raped his wife? Why have they never come? Why these men? Why are they coming to these strangers? Because it's something that's happening in the city. All right? People that live in community together are bound in covenant. Community is covenant. You do business together. You eat in each other's homes. You share life with one another. They don't want them. But it would be better for them to take those girls than to touch a man in his house. Mm-hmm. These men have come under my roof. They've come into my house. They've eaten from my table. There is no way that you're going to have them. I would rather give you my daughters, which, by the way, I know you don't want. And they wouldn't take them because that's not really what this is about. Now, in some cultures, you've heard of, in some of the Muslim countries, the men have this idea that just like Muhammad never controlled himself, they shouldn't have to control themselves. They consider arousal a sexual emergency that must be sated, and it should be sated in any way. Children, young girls, other men's wives, you have a desire, you act. So this is what we got to ask ourselves. Is he legitimately offering them, or is he shaming them? Because what's their response? But they said, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow They say, stand back. Get out of our face. This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. They took what he just said to them. One, he's called them wicked.
Mm-hmm.
Don't act so wiggly. Take my daughters. Better for you to take my daughters. Take my daughters. But these men have come under my roof, and they interpret it as judgment. This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we'll deal worse with you than with him. All right, then we just threatened. Now we're going to do worse to you than we did to him. Are they?
No. It's all talk.
Do they even try? No. It's bluster. Bluster and talk overlaid with words that we as people foreign to the culture have misinterpreted and misunderstood. Then they press hard against the man Lot. All they try to do is get past him. Oh, we're going to do worse to you. But do they take him, rip off his clothes, and gang rape him? They do not. They simply try and get past him.
They don't even strike him.
They don't even. No. They're just pushing him aside. They're not hurting him. They don't hurt him at all. They don't do anything to him. They don't punch him in the face. They don't throw him on the ground. They don't kick him. They don't do anything to him, no matter what they said. So you got to put the whole pall of the nature of this, the whole coloring of this interchange is words that have different meaning, different emotional content than the actual words themselves suggest. So they tried to press past him, but the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping for the door. All right, so we want to know, Lot is anxious about the men's safety from the very beginning. He calls himself their servant. They eat from his table. You have to question the relationship of the sons-in-laws. It's something to unpack in the story. The relationship of the sons-in-laws. Is this down to the last man hyperbole, or were his future sons-in-laws actually in the crowd, participating in this thing that they're doing against these men? He confronts the men alone with a closed door behind him. He is not afraid of them. He has nothing to fear from them. If they were thus inclined to do to him what they're saying, he would fear them. Mm-hmm. But he has nothing to fear from them because he is in a community bond with them. They don't want him, and they don't want his daughters. And he knows this. So he's in no danger from these men directly. Even when they threaten him, they merely try to get past him to get at the strangers. No punching, no kicking, no tearing, no beatings, nothing. His protection is couched in terms of hospitality rights. His offer of his daughters is interpreted by them as a judgment against them. The people have no interest in Lot or his daughters. Their rage and wickedness is so complete as to lend itself to parody proportions, groping even in blindness to still get at the men. We have this all the time in Hollywood movies. They love the bears and lions that have no consideration for their own safety. They just throw themselves at things. Animals don't do that.
No.
Animals respond to being injured. They're not so determined to kill that thing and eat that thing that they're going to kill themselves to do it. They respond to pain, but they also act like in beasts in Hollywood movies never have their appetite sated. A shark eats a big meal, and he doesn't eat again for however long.
Yep.
A tiger fills its stomach, doesn't eat again for how long. They don't just keep killing and keep killing. An animal that keeps killing has got something seriously wrong with it. So Hollywood has filled our minds with these false images about the way the world actually works. So given all this, I believe that Lot's offer was not in earnest, but was, by its very frame, intended to shame the men of Sodom, whose relationship with Lot and his family had, thus far, precluded the kind of abusive treatment that they had planned for them. So the community's extreme wickedness, including but not isolated to the violation of even the most basic hospitality rights, marked them for destruction. Their willingness to sodomize these men is a great sin. And the people in the homosexual community that try and pretend that the only thing on the table here is hospitality rights. No. This is all considered great indecency. But hospitality rights is still very important. So his offer, as far as I see it, is like a sermon against them, to expose the true wickedness. What you want to do, it would be better for you to take my daughters. You would never touch my daughters, just like you would never touch me. But it would be better for you to do that than the thing that you actually are planning to do. It is a sermon of judgment.
If you like what you're hearing today, please subscribe below, and don't forget to share it on as many platforms as you can, and tell your friends to watch. Thank you.